2 hours and 15 minutes. That was how long they made him wait. Until one person walked in and changed everything. The glass doors of Regency Capital Bank slid open, a cool gust of air conditioning washing over him, carrying the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the leather of expensive seating. The space was luxurious but calculatedly so. Nathan Cole, a black man, entered, subtly adjusting his shoulders beneath his impeccably tailored coat. He wasn't nervous. He'd been in too many boardrooms, signed too many deals, built too many things from the ground up to know that he had a right to be anywhere. He just needed them to see it. The appointment was scheduled for precisely 9 a.m. A purely business meeting, no reason to expect anything but professionalism. The bank's waiting area was a carefully crafted blend of old-world charm and modern luxury. Stepping inside, the gleam of gold accents and crystal inlays was impossible to miss. A subtle declaration that money wasn't a topic for debate here. The reception desk was like a small fortress, where a woman with a meticulously styled bun and a detached expression was engrossed in her computer screen. Her name tag read Rachel. "Welcome to Regency Capital Bank," she said, her tone perfunctory and impatient. "Do you have an appointment?" "Nathan Cole," he said, placing his leather briefcase on the counter. "I have an appointment with Olivia Trent at 9 o'clock. Rachel's fingers danced across the keyboard, her eyes flicking across the screen. "Yes, you're on the schedule," she said without a change in expression. "Please have a seat. She'll be with you shortly." Nathan nodded, choosing a chair near a large window where sunlight streamed across the marble floor in sharp lines. A group of sharply dressed people stood together in a huddle, chatting casually about something financial, but Nathan paid them no mind. He wasn't in a rush, his fingers lightly intertwined and resting on his briefcase. 8:55 a.m. He always arrived early, and he always stuck to that principle. But he observed. 9:05, 9:15. He didn't notice the first time. Banks were often delayed, no one stranger to that fact. But then came 9:30. A man in a gray suit entered, checked in with Rachel. Less than 5 minutes later, a young banker emerged and led him through the frosted glass door to the office area. Next, a woman in a gray jacket showed up without a prior appointment as far as Nathan could tell. She merely exchanged a few pleasantries with Rachel and was promptly invited inside. Nathan's name remained uncalled. He glanced at his watch. 9:45, he realized something was off. Nathan's fingers tapped lightly on the seat as he watched a steady stream of people enter and exit the bank. Some entered with a confidence that suggested this was their natural habitat, bright smiles, familiar handshakes, warm, subtle nods with the advisors. Others, like him, passively waited to be called by name. Nathan recognized the distinct difference. While he was still sitting there, the others had already been called in. He had been waiting there for almost an hour, even though his appointment was scheduled at 9 a.m. However, he was still made to sit there while almost 10 other people who came after him were led through the frosted glass doors to the executive offices. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm. He'd encountered this before in other places, excuses for their intentions disguised in polite language like, "We're so sorry, we didn't mean to make you wait so long. There must have been a problem with the scheduling. Please understand, you know how busy we are here." Nathan remained composed, even-keeled. But then another man walked in, a complete stranger with a clear air of confidence, a relaxed smile, and he was ushered inside in less than a minute. Nathan stood up, walking purposefully to the reception desk. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Is Olivia Trent aware that I'm waiting?" Rachel sighed, making no attempt to hide her annoyance. She ran her fingers across the keyboard again, her eyes glued to the screen. "She's aware. She's currently with another client." Nathan looked directly at her. "Could you double-check, please?" This time, Rachel merely shrugged. "I already told you. She'll be out soon." "How soon?" There was no answer. 10:15, over an hour had passed. People who arrived after him, needing no wait, being ushered inside with no explanation. And then it happened again. A woman in a navy dress walked in, phone pressed to her ear, her voice light and unconcerned. Rachel's demeanor transformed instantly, her voice softened, a smile appearing as if the previous indifference had never existed. "Good morning, Mrs. Kensington." The woman simply nodded, and in less than 10 seconds, another banker appeared, escorting her inside. Nathan witnessed it all. No waiting. No schedule check. No dismissive words or subtle sighs. Meanwhile, Nathan had been there for over an hour. But the woman had only been there for a few minutes. Nathan tightened his grip on his briefcase handle. He turned back to Rachel and spoke, "So, does an appointment mean anything? Or is it just about who you know gets seen first?" For the first time, Rachel looked flustered. "Just be patient. As I said, Ms. Trent will see you shortly." As Nathan anticipated, he had seen things like this before. Invisible barriers. Excuses cloaked in false politeness. But this time, he had no intention of sitting still. Nathan pulled out his phone, opened his contacts, and called Olivia Trent directly. The phone rang 3 times. A voice answered, but not Olivia's. A deep, unfamiliar male voice. "Hello?" Nathan narrowed his eyes. "I need to speak with Olivia Trent." "I'm Nathan Cole. I have an appointment with her for 9 a.m. A moment of silence stretched out. Then the voice spoke coldly. "Ms. Trent left the office at 10:05. She has an off-site appointment. Who told you to continue waiting? You can wait a little longer. Ms. Trent will be back in the bank in a few minutes." Nathan tightened his grip on the phone, his eyes flicking to Rachel, who was suddenly avoiding his gaze. He had been sitting here for over an hour while Olivia Trent wasn't even there. The atmosphere around him suddenly felt heavy. Nathan slowly took a deep breath. Then he gave a slight nod with a barely perceptible, dissatisfied smile, turned and continued to walk to the row of seats he had been waiting in since 9 a.m. But he didn't forget, because this wasn't just about waiting. This was about a truth everyone knew but no one spoke. And he wasn't going to let this go. He tried to wait a little longer and act like nothing had happened, but deep down he felt no more interest. Nathan kept calm. In life, he had faced much worse than this. He had gone bankrupt, had to start a business with his bare hands, had rebuilt a company from scratch, not to mention from a negative number. Moreover, he had to deal with arrogant investors, opponents who played dirty tricks in competition, and countless things that were not as simple as this. Yet this was a different issue. This was outright disregard, being ignored, dismissed disrespectfully as if he was just someone coming to beg for pity. Nathan slowly looked down at his watch. 11:15. By now, Olivia Trent would have supposedly returned to the bank, but Nathan was still sitting there waiting aimlessly. There was no callback or name being called, while the flow of people continued to pass him, without any rules regarding queuing or making appointments. All of the many people who came after him had been greeted, led inside, but he was still sitting there without any further inquiries. On the other side of the desk, a beautiful, fairly young teller was talking to a rather respectable man in a sleek suit. Nathan tried to listen to their relaxed, light conversation. "That's right. I told her to just walk right in," the man said with a smile. "You know, every time she comes here, she doesn't even need to schedule an appointment in advance. That's the difference for us." The teller laughed softly and replied, "Yes, sir. For Mrs. Calasandra, there is always preferential treatment here." Nathan tightened his grip on the handle of his briefcase. That was it. He realized how it worked. Rules for some, rules for others. He rested his elbows on his knees, staring at the polished marble floor. This was a test. Would he accept sitting quietly, being brushed aside and waiting until permitted? Or would he prove that his time was as valuable as anyone else's? He stood up. Not hurried, not aggressive, just resolute. He walked past the reception desk, past Rachel's vacant stare, straight towards the frosted glass door. "Sir," Rachel started, but he didn't stop. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The hallway stretched out before him, flanked by individual offices. Some doors were open, some closed, but one thing was immediately clear. Olivia Trent wasn't in a meeting. She was sitting behind her desk, typing on her laptop, completely alone. When Nathan entered, she looked up, her expression shifting from surprise to annoyance in an instant. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice stiff, "you should have waited to be called in." Nathan looked directly at her, unfazed. "I've been waiting since 9 a.m. Olivia's fingers froze on the keyboard, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Please have a seat," she finally said. Nathan sat down. Not because he was invited, but it was his decision after having to wait over 2 hours. But he knew this conversation wouldn't go in the direction Olivia wanted it to. She adjusted the stack of papers on her desk, trying to maintain a calm facade, but Nathan noticed the subtle tension. The tight set of her jaw, the flicker of impatience in her eyes. "I apologize for the delay," Olivia said, forcing a smile. "We've been extremely busy today." Busy? Nathan let the word hang in the air. He had witnessed at least 6 people being seen immediately, some without even an appointment. "Really?" His voice was calm but sharp. "Because I saw some clients who didn't have to wait at all, or even have an appointment." Olivia's lips tightened. "I assure you, Mr. Cole, it wasn't intentional. There must have been some misunderstanding." Nathan's lips curled. "Yes, a misunderstanding. How interesting." Olivia cleared her throat, trying to steer the conversation back on course. She opened a file, scanning the contents. "Now, let's talk about your loan application." Her voice regaining its cold professionalism. "I've reviewed your file, and while your financials are quite impressive, we have very strict criteria for lending conditions at the moment. I'm afraid we need some additional collateral before we can proceed." She didn't get to finish her sentence before the office door swung open. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The hallway, silent moments before, was now filled with low voices, voices carrying weight. 3 men entered, all in expensive suits, exuding an unmistakable air of power. Nathan didn't need to guess who they were. These were the decision-makers at the bank, the executives, the ones who called the shots. And leading the way was a familiar face, Charles Whitmore, CEO of Regency Capital Bank. Someone who knew exactly who Nathan was. Charles's sharp gaze swept the room before settling on Nathan. Recognition dawned instantly. "Nathan!" Charles boomed, a large smile spreading across his face. "What the hell are you doing here?" Olivia froze. Nathan stood, shaking Charles's hand firmly. "Charles, long time no see." "Indeed." Charles clapped him on the shoulder. "Still running Cole Enterprises? Still expanding it?" Nathan smiled. "Still expanding." Olivia glanced between the 2 men, her hands clenching the file. Charles turned to her, his smile vanishing. "How long has Nathan been waiting?" Silence. Olivia opened her mouth, but no words came out. Nathan didn't rush to answer. He let the question hang in the air, let its weight press down on her, on the entire room. Finally, he spoke. "A little over 2 hours." Charles's expression didn't change much, but Nathan noticed his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "Over 2 hours?" His voice was soft but loaded with implication. "You made Nathan Cole wait for over 2 hours?" Olivia scrambled for an explanation. "There was a problem with the scheduling." Charles didn't look at her. He kept his attention focused on Nathan. "You should have called me directly," he said. "I would have taken care of everything myself, instead of letting a problem like this happen." Nathan shrugged, a fleeting smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I didn't think I needed to." Charles sighed, shaking his head. He turned to Olivia, his voice now devoid of patience. "Olivia," he said, his voice calm but unable to be disobeyed, "step outside for a moment." Olivia's face paled. Her fingers clenched into fists before relaxing. "Yes, of course," she said quietly, quickly standing and leaving the room without another word. The door closed behind her, but the tension in the air remained. Charles turned back to Nathan, shaking his head again. "I don't know what happened here," he said, "but I assure you it will never happen again." Nathan didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to say anything, because what needed to be proven was abundantly clear. "We don't operate this way," Charles finally said, his voice even but sharp. Nathan tilted his head, a hint of mockery in his eyes. "Looks like this is exactly how you operate." Charles paused for a second. He didn't argue, didn't offer an excuse, because men like him, the ones in charge, knew when there was a serious problem. And right now he was calculating the extent of the damage. Nathan wasn't just any customer. He had built a multi-million-dollar consulting firm from nothing. He had a reputation in the business world, and more importantly, he knew people. And now he had a story. Charles leaned back, lacing his fingers together in front of him. "Tell me what happened." Nathan didn't mince words. He recounted everything without embellishment, the appointment, the wait, witnessing others being seen before him, Rachel's dismissive attitude, Olivia's coldness, how she had tried to brush him aside as if he were just a nameless face on a list. Charles didn't interrupt. The other 2 executives listened in silence. When Nathan stopped, the room was quiet. Finally, Charles sighed. I appreciate you being upfront about all of this, he said. And to be honest, I am furious that any of this happened. Nathan leaned back in his chair, raising an eyebrow. And why is that? Charles gave a short, humorless laugh. Because this is the kind of thing that destroys reputations. We worked hard to build the reputation of this bank. And now I have to clean up a mess that I didn't even know existed in my system. He turned to one of the executives. Get Olivia out of her office immediately. Arrange a meeting for her dismissal. I'll have a talk with her later. The man nodded and left immediately. Charles turned back to Nathan. Your loan application. I assume it's solid. Nathan tapped his briefcase. See for yourself. Charles opened the file and flipped through a few pages. He only read a few lines before shaking his head. This shouldn't have been an issue. He glanced at the remaining executive. Expedite the process. I want this approved today. Nathan raised an eyebrow. That quick? Charles looked directly at him. You should have had it 2 hours ago. I'm just trying to make things right. Nathan considered that. This wasn't generosity. Not a moral attempt to fix the mistake. This was control. This was crisis management. This was ensuring that the story ended in this office before it spread to places Charles didn't want it to go. And Nathan understood the game perfectly. But he wasn't going to let Charles get away with it that easily. I'll accept the approval, Nathan said, standing. But fixing things for me doesn't mean you've solved the real problem. Charles's expression didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes. We'll have a long discussion about that, he said. Nathan picked up his briefcase, giving a slight nod before turning to leave the room. But before he went, he didn't forget to stop, looking directly at Rachel. She didn't have the same confidence she had that morning. The midday heat enveloped Nathan as he stepped outside. The facade of Regency Capital Bank gleamed in the sunlight. But inside, cracks had appeared. This wasn't just about a loan. Not just about Olivia. It was about something larger. Something that had been repeated thousands of times in thousands of different places. It wasn't always obvious. Not always loud. But it was always there. The assumption that some people deserved to walk straight into those offices, while others had to wait. The dismissive glances. The polite but calculated refusals. Invisible barriers that could always be explained away logically. But not today. Today, someone had been held accountable. And next time, if working at some other organization, before Olivia Trent looked at her appointment list, she would surely rethink to avoid making such a serious mistake as she did. A gentle chime sounded. Nathan checked his phone. A new email had arrived with the subject line, Loan approved. He gave a slight smirk, slid his phone into his pocket, and walked towards his car. Respect isn't given. It has to be demanded. And today he had gotten what he wanted. What are your thoughts on today's story? If you've ever been in a situation like this, if you've ever been overlooked, ever felt that your time, presence, or work wasn't valued, speak up. Don't wait for permission. Take your place yourself. Be as brave and strong as Nathan. And if they try to keep you out, make them understand that it's a mistake. Moreover, if you are those who are doing any job related to customer service, make sure you always follow the principle of order. Never underestimate any individual by brushing them aside, showing disrespect and considering them invaluable. Leave your thoughts here and let's discuss in more depth the similar stories like this. Don't forget to share the video, click the like button and subscribe the channel to keep up with many other stories. Who knows, the next time it will be someone you know. Goodbye and see you in the next stories.